Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on My Information and Data Are on the Internet. So what? I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. I'm going to be your host today, and our presenter is Bud Freund. More on Bud in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA, and locally here at SCORE Fairfield County, we have about 100 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling, and you can do that by face-to-face, video, telephone, or email. And you can access that by using the yellow bit.ly link that you see on the screen, or you can go to our website and click on the Request a Mentor link at fairfieldcounty.score.org. We also offer educational workshops and webinars like the one today, roughly about 100 throughout the year. And lastly, we offer extensive resources and tools on our website, including access to subject matter experts. Our next live webinar will be next Thursday, October 14th at noon. And the topic is Financing Your Small Business with Joe McCaffrey presenting. And again, you can find more specifics on that webinar on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And if you're on our website, you'll also be able to find a large number of archived webinars on a wide range of topics that can be viewed on demand as you like. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation today. And so if you have a question, please use the Q&A button that can be accessed by hovering on the bottom of your screen. And you can submit that question at any time during the presentation. As I say, Bud will take them at the end. Our webinar will end promptly at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website within about 24 to 48 hours. So I know there's a lot of material coming up from Bud today, and so you may want to make note of that recording. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Bud Freund. Bud has been self-employed for 40 years, and he's been providing IT solutions to homes and small businesses for over 20 years. He currently teaches technology life skills at the King's School. As a certified SCORE mentor, he also regularly presents technology webinars and workshops throughout Fairfield County. I'll now turn it over to Bud. Bud, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for joining us. We've got a busy hour and lots of information. I like to tell people what you're going to hear about. And as Bob mentioned, you will be able to find this available online very shortly. The other thing you might want to consider is to take some screenshots along the way if it's information that you want to have. Before we get too deep into all of it, though, I would like you to take a moment and think about if your computers at work stopped, how you would do these 4 items. Because if you use your phone, a tablet, an old laptop, doesn't matter. But to tell people you're out of business because your computer isn't working isn't going to get you very far. And understand that if you take the time to figure out these 4 things, you will have a leg up on a multinational corporation that had absolutely no idea of what to do when North Korea shut them down. Now, education is a really important item, and if you saw the Steven Spielberg movie, Catch Me If You Can, it's about a professional con man named Frank Abagnale, who, after going to jail, went to work for the FBI at Quantico, teaching FBI agents how to detect scams and how to stop them. And in his words, as you can see in bold yellow, the most important thing you can do today is to be educated in what's going on. And that's what I'm going to try to do for you here. One of the reasons it's so important is because a lot of the problems that occur aren't the computers that are creating the problems. It's the people using the computers. So it's us. We need to be very mindful of things. And don't think you're alone in all of this. It's been changing dramatically for years, and we're just starting to figure out what some of those changes have been and what we have to do to safeguard our lives online for ourselves. We do have the chat area open if you do have questions, which I will be able to answer hopefully at the end. Every now and then people do stump the professor. But with this idea of Einstein's theory of simplicity, I would like to try and explain these two computer terms that come up very regularly when you talk to the professionals. And the first one, an attack plane, just so you understand, that is an A-10 Warthog. It has a 30-millimeter Gatling gun in its snout and more firepower under its wings than you want coming at it. And as for a threat actor, we all know and love. So now that we've gotten through those two very important computer terms, let's start to get down to it. And I want to talk about initially this everything thing that we all have. And it really does do everything. It's billing, banking, investing, research, recreation, scheduling, education, shopping, and inexplicably, of course, binge watching cats on YouTube. If I've missed anything, please let me know. I'd love to add to this list, but that's what we do on these machines. And to safeguard them, the first thing that is essential to do is to update your operating system and your apps. This is one of the most important ways that you can plug holes in these devices. There are 80,000 doors into and out of a computer. Updating plugs the holes. Secondly, I do not know a single human being who could tell me where that bit.ly at the top of the screen is going to take them. So before you put something harmful onto your computer, you might want to use that URL to deconstruct where that bit.ly is going to take you. And similarly, those QR codes, again, unless you're a really special person, I don't know anybody who can read that and tell you where it's going to take you. So proceed cautiously on these things. You are going to hear me say click first and regret later more times than you would like. Now, we are a community online, and that online community really does have value. It does have problems, and it does have solutions, and it's all up there. And to understand your value in online information, understand that in 2013, Facebook could value the information of a user at $19 advertising dollars per year. And by 2020, 7 years later, it was up to $164 per user per year. And if you do your multiplication, whether it's for monthly active users or daily users, we are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue. And what do they spend it on? Well, they spend it on buildings like this. They've got 12 of these server farms throughout Facebook and throughout the world. And I use this in other presentations, and I want you to notice that there aren't a whole lot of cars for such a really large building. And this is why. It's full of boxes, and those boxes are all computers, and they're all there because of what I call the 3-second rule. Numerous people have presented the fact that a human attention span is only 8 seconds, and a goldfish has more attention span than us. What does this mean to Facebook? If they don't get Facebook in your face in 3 seconds, you will go elsewhere. And that's what they're spending their money on, getting you in front of Facebook. So inside that box, more boxes. computers, about 20 of them, I think, if I've counted this correctly once before. And all of those boxes, all those computers are connected by fiber optic cable, moving information at 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light. That's to keep you engaged. Now, quick, how does all of this work? Well, when my daughter was getting irritating about going to college, I would explain to her that I was going to ship her off to the University of Sydney and we might come visit her once. Now, she didn't believe there was a University of Sydney, so I had to show it to her. Well, for me, in the United States, to show University of Sydney somewhere else on the internet means that I have done a series of hops over multiple computers, and you can trace that. Traceroute is a DOS command, and you can see in that column all of the computers that I connected to that said, Bud's in New York, Bud's in Connecticut, Bud wants to see Sydney, Australia, and all of these people took that information and pushed it down the line. And my IP address is the one at the top, and that other one is the one at the bottom. And in the United States, it is law for internet service providers to keep their log records for legal reasons or for whatever other security reasons. And those logs, as you can see, they don't care whether you're looking for University of Sydney or you're looking for Stephanie Clifford. And you can tap as fast as you want and you can get to anywhere in the world. All of that compiles into something called your digital footprint, and all of it is traceable. And understand that we didn't realize all of the information that was being gathered about us. That text in white was a conversation I had last week. And I will tell you, if you are using Google, you are going online and you are being tracked. Now, there are some laws in place that are trying to safeguard and prevent these things. There is the California Consumer Protection Act, where you can opt out of information being gathered about you. There is the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, where you have to opt in. In other words, if you don't do anything, you're not going to get any of this information and nothing is going to be tracked on you. It's against the law in Europe. In New York State, the SHIELD law requires you as a business owner to safeguard the information of your customers. And it is important to note, if you are a Connecticut business, and you have New York State customers, you are obligated to protect their information per the terms of the New York State SHIELD law. Facebook has been in the news quite a bit of late, and if you did not read the Wall Street Journal series, there's more to come, and it is absolutely fascinating what information they have, they know, and they make profit on. So rather than going into great detail on that, it's worth looking into and understand that your data has been used for fun and profit. And it's been used, and in today's dollar value, it's probably up above that $164 per user. Now, in 2016, a vice president at Facebook named Andrew Bosworth wrote a 400-word memo that you can read in full at the BuzzFeed website because it was taken down. And basically what he said was that if Facebook is connecting people, they are doing de facto good. despite all of the documentation that we're now learning about, where not everything is so de facto good. I would like to also show you the de facto good of Facebook in action. And it starts with a fellow named Professor Alexander Kogan, who went to Facebook and asked them if he could do some research on their database, which they agreed to, and apparently they didn't read any of the terms and conditions for his accessing of the data. So Professor Kogan passed the data over to Cambridge Analytica, all 87 million users' information, so that they could slice and dice it and pass it over to the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, Russia, who were buying advertisements in battleground states for rubles so that they could post images like the one you see below. And I've got that larger coming up. Don't worry, it was part of the government inquiry. It's available, which we finally found out that there was Russian intervention in our elections. And while those 13 Russians will never see a US courtroom, we do know that there was a problem. Understand, it is very important to understand. We traced this through VPN tunnels, which is all the secrecy and privacy that everybody thinks is going to safeguard them. And we can name the 13 Russians who intervened in our election. Everything is traceable. And understand that after doing their inquiry, the federal government had Facebook pay a $5 billion fine because they didn't do anything wrong. I don't know many places that give $5 billion to the government for not doing anything wrong. And coincidentally to Francis Hogan's disclosure of 10,000 documents, we now have another suit that is pending because apparently that $5 billion should not have come out of Facebook, according to people inside of Facebook. More to come on that. Now, I want to also, you'll see in a little while, talk about the images that we put online. They are also part of the information and data that we post on Facebook. And if you put too big a file online, people are able to see that Mark Zuckerberg tapes over his microphone and he tapes over his video camera. He doesn't want you to do that with Facebook, but he does. So why do we know? The file that was uploaded was large enough that you could blow it up to see what's going on. We'll talk about that in greater detail in just a bit. So understand, you are the product when it's a free service. Now, very briefly, if you have an iPhone, where again, Apple is claiming that with their new operating systems, you can hit the do not track on an app, and unfortunately, it's still being tracked. I would recommend any article that Jeffrey Fowler writes for the Washington Post. He does extraordinarily good homework. And as you can see, there are 29 data points which basically turn into a fingerprint of you and your phone for advertisers, and that data is being sold. In fact, it's being sold by companies like App Annie. And I don't quite follow this article, but apparently App Annie takes information about publicly traded apps, slices and dices that information, and then sells it to Wall Street firms who then go to their customers and recommend that you purchase whatever the stock might be. However, apparently, when the numbers didn't work just right for App Annie, they would fudge them and sell them anyway. So The Securities and Exchange Commission found out that this was being done. And again, App Annie has paid a $10 million fine for not doing anything wrong. Now, on the flip side, this Snapchat app just came out this week, and I think it is probably one of the best things for your Thanksgiving family dinner. They are now offering a tool in Snapchat to allow you to run for office locally. In other words, you go to Snapchat, you open the Run for Office tool, you put in your zip code, and you can get all of the information that you might need in order to run for office. Why do I think this is so wonderful? Well, because invariably there is somebody that's going to be telling you about, oh, that guy who's the mayor, he doesn't know nothing, and what a waste of time, and he doesn't blah, 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 blah. Well, now you will be able to say to that person, why don't you run for office? And then instead of complaining about that person who's in office, people can see what your ideas are and they can complain about you. So I think it's just a terrific tool. And one other thing to understand is that Snapchat was almost part of Facebook. And I will admit that at the time, I thought Evan Spiegel was nuts to turn down this offer. However, if you look at what Snapchat is doing today versus what Facebook is doing today, he probably knew something that we didn't. Now, I want to start talking about, if my memory is correct, Section 230 of the Federal Communications Code, which describes websites like Google, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok as platforms. This is a very important word. A platform, by the definition in Section 230, is a place that allows for freedom of speech and is not liable for anything that's posted. And this is where large numbers of problems are starting to occur. In the news business, you have retractions and clarifications. Somebody didn't get this number right, okay? And either Washington Post or Wall Street Journal will be obligated to clarify this information that has to be corrected. Similarly, if the New York Times published this article and it was incorrect, Apple's army of lawyers would sue them. It's happened. Not only has it happened, but because of the liability that was levied on Gawker, they were shut down. And coming up, folks, these are coming. Stay tuned. There's going to be plenty of activity in the very near future on these. Now, Facebook is global, so other countries have different rules. In the US, our First Amendment allows for freedom of speech. However, unless you're a platform, there is no freedom from consequence. So in Australia, Facebook can be sued. People posting on Facebook can now be sued. That's in Australia. I want to be very clear about that. And by the way, that law that passed in April of 2019, two major points to it. First, Australia can fine Facebook up to 10% of their gross profit, and Facebook can have its executives thrown in jail for 3 years if there are violent posts found on Facebook in Australia. Now, Trudy Wade is my poster child for Section 230. And this was a Google search. She has been fighting this, and it was far worse 2 or 3 years ago. This was polled yesterday. Now, whether it is true or not, I don't believe that anybody should have to start from here. You may find out that they're bigoted, but you should not be having to start your reputation from here. And there's very little that you can do to get Google to take these images down because they're a platform. Now, I want to talk about TikTok for just a few moments because there seems to be a lot of kid activity going on. And unfortunately, the way that the TikTok algorithm seems to work is that if you stopped to read the text that is in that TikTok video, TikTok would say, oh, you're interested in eating disorders. And since you're interested in eating disorders, let me show you these other things. And the next thing you know, you start going down that rabbit hole. Okay? It's a linger and learn philosophy. So if you keep flipping, they're not going to add that to your feed. If you stop, it feeds you more. Now, we'll talk about the devious lick in just a minute, but first of all, that bit.ly up there is to the article on the previous page. A couple of quick statistics on TikTok. And again, if you read that article, the people from TikTok will tell you that they are using artificial intelligence as well as over 10,000 people to be checking the content on TikTok. But understand, there are over 689 million people on TikTok monthly, which means that you have a 1 to 68,900 people to try and police. In my opinion, stuff is going to slip through the cracks like the devious lick, where kids are going into schools and vandalizing and stealing. Or the newer, more recent item you can look up on TikTok is slap a teacher. And this can be traced back to a person, but it's up there and it's happening. And because TikTok is a platform, TikTok is not liable. Not a huge fan of Twitter either. Unfortunately, people do use it, and it just does make things go a little bit sideways and awry. Now, I talked before about artificial intelligence and I prefer to call it truly artificial intelligence. Some people knit, some people do crossword puzzles. I make images like that on my iPhone and decided one day that I'd try to post that on Instagram. And apparently that image goes against the Instagram community guidelines. Artificial intelligence has said this is a bad image to post on Instagram. These are not, which is why I like to think of it as truly artificial intelligence. So proceed cautiously with social media. It's being revealed to not be the place we thought that it was going to be. And to gather my news, I hit probably 8, 9 different places because I don't believe in a single spot being valuable. And these are all pulled from Google News and Weather. In my opinion, I don't think that any of them, quite frankly, are top stories. I think there are other things that would be top stories. So again, proceed cautiously. Get that healthy skepticism about the stuff that you're seeing online. Now, I want to talk for a moment about the images that you put online. That picture that I'm holding is 3 feet by 4 feet, and it came out of my iPhone. Now, that picture at the bottom is Chrissy Teigen's hamster that wants to go to Harvard. I'm sure you recall that there were people who went to jail because they tried to bribe their way into colleges. One of the things they were doing is that they would download a large image from the internet, and then they would Photoshop their child into the image. Similar to what we saw earlier from Mark Zuckerberg's very large image file going up on Instagram, you can see the tape over his video camera and his microphone. If you upload large image files, you leave yourself susceptible to problems. Reduce the file size. There are apps on both the Android and the iPhone side. I believe one on the iPhone side is called Resize. And if you were to go into Google Play, you could type resize image files and be able to find an app that will make them smaller. Now, Epic was another hack that occurred recently, and now we're finding out who were the owners of websites like QAnon and Proud Boys. And unfortunately, now that this information is coming out, people are losing their jobs because of it. So what happens if your data goes online? Could lose your job. Big problems. Also, if you're going to have an affair, you may not want to do it from the computer at your office. 30 million names came out of that Ashley Madison hack. Proceed cautiously, folks. A few things about identity theft, which again is just proliferating because of the quantity of information that's going online. And I will get to safeguarding it, I promise. All three of the credit checking services have been hacked. And those are the dates, and those are the number of names that were pulled in each one of the hacks. There's all sorts of problems that occur, not just in the getting of your information taken, but just in what you need to do to address it. And the emotional impact. And understand that this stuff can be a very big problem. Far safer to take, far better idea to take precautions if you can. So let's get to it. First off, if you turn off Facebook's tracking ability, they're not going to push sneakers and cars and whatever else you've been looking at on you. The bit.ly at the top is to a Jeffrey Fowler Wall Street Journal article that explains this in greater detail. That website at the bottom is where you can go in and turn things off so Facebook doesn't follow you. You can also go into the ad settings so that Facebook's data partners aren't following you either. And you can do it in Instagram as well. If you go to myactivity.google.com, you can turn off the Google tracking from your Gmail account. And don't worry about that sad computer down there. He's got billions of other people to follow besides you. You can also turn off the YouTube tracking and all of the other tracking that might be done through YouTube and Google. I would also recommend that you consider a browser other than Chrome. A few choices are Brave, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge. Chrome is tracking you. Also, if you go to aboutads.info, and if you see in the just above that big red arrow, if you see that triangle with the letter I, this is an organization that is trying to mitigate the amount of advertising that is coming at you. And if you see that letter, that triangle with the I, the website you are on is a participant in this. So you go to the control button. From the control button, you go to the Web Choices tool. From the Web Choices tool, you go to turn off advertisements from 134 different respected advertising agencies. Another thing that's very important, it's really easy to marry up whatever you're going to. Venmo, Nebo is a piece of software I use. Pick your Amazon. You can tie things together and make your life a whole lot easier, but understand when you tie these things together, you are now passing your data so that more of you can be tracked. I strongly recommend you get a different user and password at every website you use. That said, I will now talk out of the other side of my mouth and tell you that through my Amazon account, I get the Washington Post for $5 a month. And that's about the only place where I have cross-pollinated. It's just an irresistible deal. Passwords. If you lock your car, if you lock your house, I urge you to lock your data. And I am a big fan of what's called the LEET language. It is the transposing of letters and numbers and symbols. And as long as you don't go crazy with something like that cap H in anti-disestablishmentarianism, it will work out just fine. The bottom item is another mnemonic to consider. Person, place, thing. You throw that through the LEET language and you've got a pretty bulletproof password. Just remember though, do not put it on a Post-it on your monitor. It is not a good place to put your information. Now, Sun Tzu wrote that hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years ago. I'm not sure that he wrote the bottom part of it, but you do get the general idea, I hope. These are very important pieces of information, and I urge you to protect them. Oh, and let's not forget Alexa, who happens to, mine's just woken up, and who happens to, Alexa, stop. Happens to listen to everything you say, whether you're a lawyer talking to clients or you're just asking a question. And remember to turn these things off because that information is being tracked. And if you didn't think that was a good tracking method by Amazon, now they're going to have this little robot come following you around the house. And I do believe that they are now also coming out with a drone that will fly around your house to watch everything that's going on. Not my first choice. And just as a quick tech tip, the swatting your mouse to make it work isn't going to make the mouse work. It will make the mouse break, and you should be patient, but I don't believe that hitting the mouse or swatting it back and forth is going to be a viable solution. Oh, and one other thing about your website, I would patrol it on a regular basis because I do not believe that your first visit to a homeopathic doctor should be about how to monetize a porn site. You got to keep track of this stuff, folks. It's insidious and it's just creeping in everywhere, especially in email, which is the lifeblood of most people's business. And I urge you to invest in your business. I am a huge fan of Microsoft hosted Exchange. It will allow you to have a single point in the sky and be able to reply from computer, tablet, smartphone, and keep all three of them in sync, because the unwritten law of email clearly states, if you do not have hosted exchange, the email that you absolutely positively must get your hands on will not be on the device that you are touching. Hosted exchange is a great business investment. We'll talk more about blind carbon copies for your emails to protect people in a moment. Also, if you hover over any link in an email and you look in the bottom left corner of Microsoft Outlook, it will tell you where that link is going to take you, so you do not click first and regret later. Also, if you have stuff coming from food stores and clothing stores and gardening stores and stores and stores and stores, I recommend, particularly with an iPhone, that you unsubscribe from your phone. It will be at the bottom of the email. And the reason I recommend unsubscribing from an iPhone is that Apple keeps a really clean sandbox. So if there is something that could be a problem, big word, nefarious. If there is something nefarious going on, you delete it from your phone, it will not corrupt your computer. Now that 6 degrees of separation, you send an email and that email goes to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, and you don't know who's at the far end of that chain. You do not know if it's a guy with a white hat, a good guy, or a guy with a black hat, a bad guy. And because of that, proceed cautiously. And more importantly, watch what you're clicking. This was a Microsoft item. There's no Microsoft logo. There's no nothing that would make this correlate back to Microsoft. It would be a big problem. And my all-time favorite, I know for a fact that FedEx does not need to use support@dentistelmhurstny.com for its email address. This is worse than a HIPAA violation. So proceed cautiously. And how do you do that? If you've got a large number of people you need to email, use the BCC field in your email. Everybody gets the email, put the names in the body of the email, and then their email addresses aren't traveling all over the internet. BCC keeps people safer. Again, one of my favorite emails of all time, the director of the FBI sent to me from his personal Polish email service a letter telling me that there is $1.5 million waiting for me if I contact the only Western Union post office. I didn't know Western Union was a post office, and use the Gmail for that person. This went into a screenshot and the circular file. Another item. In this case, Astor Services is a community service organization in the Bronx. They had no idea that somebody had hacked into them. This person was pretty good. They had used the BCC, so you had no idea of where this went out to. Contact people to let them know that their email is being used for phishing and hacking and spoofing. And those are a few of the email addresses that you can send to down below. The only one that I've gotten a hiccup from is the Apple phishing email address that would not accept something that did not come from an Apple product. It may work with an Apple product. It should work with any. But these are places, if we don't help ourselves, right now the laws in place are not going to help us. Sergeant Phil Esterhaus from Hill Street Blues put it beautifully, and there's nothing else to say in that regard. Have I mentioned this before? Every presentation should have 3 parts. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, also known as the recap. And as I've said at the top there is stuff you can do. You can put in 2-step authentication, multi-factor authentication, 2-factor authentication, whatever it's called, a step before getting onto your banking or potentially your email or your online documents. This keeps you and your data safer. Please, I urge you, it'll make you work slower, but it's okay. If you go slower, you'll be safer. Avoid that cross-pollination of using your Gmail address on some other thing, because all they do is keep track of where you're going and what you're doing. Lock down those Google and Facebook accounts. And one of the other items I made note for myself here is, if you change your date of birth in Facebook, the year of birth in Facebook, you will still get your happy birthday messages. But if you can put 1492 as your year of birth, they're not going to aggregate you into that data that sells particularly well, and you will get fewer ads. As I mentioned earlier, if you hover over email links and look in the bottom left corner, you will see where that link will take you. Unless you need location services, turn it off. It will save your battery. Or to put it differently, if you need location services to get from your home office to the kitchen, you need to drink less, or we need to talk. You don't need location services on all the time. Just turn it off. It's a tracking mechanism. And understand that the information that you're putting onto the internet and taking from the internet is now at risk. Get less information from your customers. Don't take their credit cards. Tell them for their safety, you don't store that anymore. It is for your safety as well. You have a New York State customer, you are obligated to the Shield Law. BCCs for email groups. Put the list of names in the email so everybody knows. For those of you who don't remember Edward R. Murrow or Walter Cronkite, they didn't use inflection in their news reporting. The information we're getting online is unfortunately cited because we no longer have a Fairness Act, which was repealed during the Reagan administration. Used to be newspapers had to present both sides of the argument. They don't have to do that right now. So you can present only one side. I urge you to go looking for the other. Those credit checks, lock down those credit unions, because they're the ones that are going to allow people to steal your identity, get a credit card in your name, and be able to buy whatever. Lock it down, make it difficult for yourself as well as for them. And as I said earlier, update your operating system and your apps, because plugging those holes is just another safeguard. And have I mentioned that click first, regret later concept? Please keep it in mind, folks. And with that, Bob, any questions?
Well, thanks, Bud. We'll now use the remaining time for questions. We've got a little over 15 minutes, and we'll take as many as possible up to 1 o'clock. So just as a reminder, you can submit them through the Q&A feature, which you can access from the bottom of your screen. And we'll start. We do have a few already, Bud. And the first one is, when we visit a website that we don't have an account on, if we click opt out because we're California residents, but we're not actually California residents, is that a strategy to stop our website behavior from being tracked?
It is a consideration. I am not an attorney, but I would suggest to you that if you opt out and you are not a California resident, the website is under no obligation to stop tracking you. And as you saw on the screen from Apple, there are 29 data points that are still being tracked, despite Apple telling apps, you can't track people, and we're turning that off. So yes, you can try it, but I'm not sure how viable it would be. Or to put it differently, if you lived in California and you found out that your data was still being tracked, you would have grounds for a lawsuit.
Okay, great. Here's the next question. Is there any way or ways that I can take back my search history from Google, Microsoft Edge, and other browsers I've used on my smartphones and computers, and or getting the data from my telecom provider, and or from local communications services that powered my searches using Wi-Fi? Or can I or a lawyer write into them and have them destroy that data tied to my identity?
A lot of question to unpack there. So let's go through a bunch of the pieces. I do not believe you are going to be able to take back the data. By legal requirement, places like Google or Verizon or Opt Online need to be able to present documentation if subpoenaed. So they need to have that data. So you cannot, quote unquote, take it back. You can delete an account, although it will take between 3 and 6 months to delete a Facebook account. And during the course of that time, Facebook will perpetually poke you to say, are you really sure you want to delete this account? But then you would need to start over again. And while you can request the don't track my data, it's becoming flagrantly obvious that until we have serious laws in place, people are pretty much Wild West doing as they please. Now, can a lawyer request information from ISPs and Wi-Fi accounts and from the other list that you mentioned? Yes, they can. I'm involved, unfortunately, for the client is having a contentious divorce, and lawyers' letters are going out to various places to say, I need a record of activity that was going on in these various places. But you do need a lawyer to draft that, and they would need to be very specific in the requests, which unfortunately many lawyers are not fluent, quote unquote, fluent in technology. I need information for this IP address. I need information going in and out of this specific telephone at this specific time on this specific day. Some of the information probably not erasable. It's kind of like putting the genie back in the bottle. And in other respects, I think you actually might want to be able to have it.
Okay, that's great. A lot to consider there. Let's move on to our next one from Gloria. How can we stop tracking on the iPhone?
Well, Apple does have a do not track feature in the operating system. And unfortunately, despite their claim, it still seems to be happening. And until there's incredibly hardline laws, I'm not sure how you can totally bulletproof that, number one. And secondly, in some respects, the tracking does have a value. I use Waze. Waze has to track me, and I'm very grateful when I'm in unknown territory that Waze is tracking me. So in some respects, we do want it to go away, and in other respects, we don't. It's a very difficult line.
Very helpful. Here's one on password managing. Your thought of keeping all of our passwords on a password manager. I've heard building a database on a password protected Excel document, for example, is more risky than a cloud-based service because how we protect our computer and network is probably inferior and more susceptible to hack than the password manager service. So just your thoughts on using that type of service.
Um, I'd urge you to look up the number of times that the president of LifeLock has been hacked, number one. Secondly, I am not an advocate of password managers because everybody knows what's in them. Third, the creation of a spreadsheet or a database or a whatever on your computer, in my opinion, is a safer method to go, provided you call it something like shopping list, wedding guests, birthdays and anniversaries, anything but, this is the spreadsheet I've created for all of my passwords, click here. That's a really bad name for the file.
Okay, very good. Um, Here's another one. My phone number, address, and age is on many, many websites that I never gave my information to when I Google search my name. I've unsubscribed from ones that allowed me, like the white pages, but some require you to give your driver's license or more private information or fax/email, them validating our personal information, which I intuitively think is a terrible idea given how unethical these companies are to publicly show and sell my data without my knowing permission. Can I scare these companies into deleting my information without having to pay a lawyer to write them, for example? So I think this is a variation on the topic that we just talked about, but maybe you've got some additional comments here.
If you lived in California, you could scare them. Until until there is a stronger set of laws, I'm not sure how you're going to get to where you want to go. I applaud your understanding that you don't give people more proprietary, confidential, personal information to make what they've got go away. That's pure scam. Unfortunately, I think, like many of us, we're caught between a rock and a hard place with this data information that has been taken from us, and until we get some stronger laws in place, quite frankly, you've stumped me on the what to and how to.
Okay, stump the professor here. We got time for maybe one or two more. Here's one from Norman. Being that Microsoft Windows 11 has been released, what does it offer users regarding enhanced privacy? Would you recommend upgrading immediately? My laptop has Windows 10 and doesn't allow me to upgrade to Windows 11. What can I do?
The people with the arrows in their backs are always the pioneers. I am not an advocate of upgrading immediately. I like to see other people complain so I know what I'm getting myself into. If your computer has gone through the approved hardware upgrade path, in other words, if your laptop started in Windows 7, you upgraded it to Windows 8, you upgraded it to Windows 10, and now Microsoft is offering Windows 11, and they're not letting it play on Windows 7 hardware. If you want Windows 11, you will be committed to purchasing a new computer, which may be worth your while, because if you've gone through that many upgrade paths and you do as much work as the rest of us on computer, you may want to treat yourself to a bigger, better, faster, more machine, because we're on them a lot. What will Windows 11 offer? Haven't touched it yet, and the primary read, as you have found out already, is that not every computer is going to be usable in Windows 11. So they've basically made that cutoff point. To put it differently, put it a different way, once upon a time, motors in cars didn't require a catalytic converter. And over time, the motors in cars that did require a catalytic converter became the mainstay, and the other cars basically did not. They go away.
Okay, thanks, Bud. There was a lot of terrific information here. And just a reminder to everyone, the session has been recorded and will be available on our website, www.fairfieldcounty.score.org, and you can access it under on-demand webinars, and it should be there in about 24 hours. Our next live webinar is next Thursday, October the 14th at noon, and the topic is Financing Your Small Business with Joe McCaffrey presenting. Again, more details on the website. And if you're interested in free individual counseling, you can use the link on the screen or go to Request a Mentor on our website. And if I could also ask you to fill out your evaluations that have been sent at the end of the webinar, they're very helpful to us. Again, on behalf of SCORE, thank you all for attending today's live webinar. And a special big thank you to Bud Freund for presenting today. And stay well, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.